All right. I don't know if you guys have been watching The Last of Us, but I have, and it's actually really good. I really enjoyed the show a lot. I'm surprised I've never played the game. I have them all because I have that weird like PlayStation Pass thing that I don't even really use. I should probably actually use it. Um, but this is a video. It's called "Is Masculinity Changing?" and it's about The Last of Us. Now, I don't. If there's a spoiler alert, you might want to click off the video. But there's an episode where, what is it? Ron? Is it Ron from Parks and Rec? By the way, wearing a Parks and Rec hat. What do you think about that? Is in the show. He's like this wilderness survival guy. Turns out he's gay. Meets another gay dude. They have a really nice life, and it's good. It's nice. The show's great. Honestly, there's not a single bad actor so far that I've seen. It's really hard hitting. It's made me sad multiple times. Genuinely, they do a really good job of story building. This was one of the really good episodes of story building. I would recommend you watching it. There's 3 more episodes left that have to come out. Nick Offerman's the actor's name. Okay, fair enough. But let's see what this person has to say. It's from Schnee. So
Bill's introduction in The Last of Us Episode 3 is just about the most masculine 5 minutes of a TV show I've ever seen in my entire life. This dude is hiding from the government in a survivalist bunker he built with his own 2 hands. He is climbing out full-on in tactical mode with his gas mask and his shotgun and his ammo bandolier. He's riding around in his pickup truck, scavenging all these big greasy machines. He's shopping at the hardware store so he can build his manly death trap of an all-American suburban haven. And alone, by the way, he doesn't need anyone's help, just his own 2 hands, his power tools, his axe so he can chop wood like a real man, his farming tools so he can get dirty like a real man, live off the land. This dude is self-sufficient. He is skilled. He doesn't need society. He doesn't need anyone. No, sir. We got the red, white, and blue flying outside. We got our Gadsden hanging inside. Country music playing in the background. Bill is good to go. And it goes way beyond.
I mean, he's not just a man. He's a good old boy. All right. I like the character a lot. When they made him gay, it just didn't matter. I mean, that's kind of where we're trending. I felt like this was a really good representation of like trying to do inclusivity. Like they made a gay dude who wasn't like fucking like explicitly like super gay. He wasn't like a fucking stereotype. He was just like a man that happened to be gay. And that's how I feel like they should operate with these things. That's the way I think you should do inclusivity, is just like make a character that happens to be a thing that you want the inclusivity to be. Don't make the character like the whole central point of the character that thing. It was nice, you know, like instead of like, oh, let me make the Little Mermaid black just because we want to be able to tell you that she's black. Let's make a good like Little Mermaid movie and then just happen to make the actor black because it's a good actor. You know, stuff like that is always like appreciated. I thought they did a good job of softening them up though.
And just what happens in the sequence. We also feel that manly energy in the way Bill dresses, in his silence, in his stoic unemotionality, as he just keeps working, keeps plugging away, keeps doing what needs to be done. But there's a couple things that got sneaked in under the rug while we were all in gung-ho man mode. The term I'm calling this in my head is bridge traits. And this phenomenon, which I'll explain in a second, this is the key that opened up my understanding about what's going on a macro level with writing masculinity in 2023, which is a topic I've been intensely curious about. I made that video about Arcane's male characters, all masculine in very different ways, really unique ways, and after that I started realizing, wait a second, we're seeing a trend here, maybe even multiple trends. I just saw the new Knives Out movie, which was great, and Benoit Blanc is another really interesting male lead. Again, masculine in a pretty distinct way that I cannot imagine seeing done like 10, 15, 20 years ago. We got The Mandalorian taking care of Baby Yoda. Stranger Things, you got Jim Hopper, single dad, girl dad, dealing with single girl dad stuff.
Well, I think that like they're doing masculine characters the right way. When you look at something like The Mandalorian or Jim Hopper or something, you notice it's a trend of like a real man, or somebody people would consider to be a real man who has their shit together, has a job, they're cold and a little bit cut off from the world, being softened up by like a more feminine or presence, like a younger, like a girl, like a daughter figure, or even like the child. I don't know if you call it feminine, but something that they need to take care of that like lightens them up and makes them a little bit more emotionally empathetic, which is exactly the arc that you know, the gay character Ron, I'm gonna call him Ron, the gay character has, and I think it's a really good way to like look at masculinity. I think that there's a lot of hard men, no pun intended, am I right? But there's like a lot of like hard, and I think that's good. I think it's okay to be like, it is okay to be a strong man who maybe isn't super emotionally available, but it's good to have a little more emotional availability. It's not a bad thing to learn to not like, you know, be super emotional, but then learn to be emotional, right? Like you have your baseline of like, you know, you don't overshare, but you share just enough with the right people. And that's what these characters are about. It's like about that kind of growth. And I like it a lot. I resonate with it. It's pretty cool. I mean, even God of War, the newest one, is just about that. His kid softens him up. He learns to be a little more empathetic. He's a real man that learns empathy, and I really resonate with those things because I feel like I'm going through a similar arc with my wife. So it's cool.
Steve Harrington dealing with a decline in social dominance. That's unusual to see. You got the show's admirable loser leaders, Eddie in season 4, Mike in season 1, and I realize these characters are real people, but movies like King Richard celebrating the challenges and triumph of girl dadhood, Elvis, obviously a super masculine guy, but the movie goes out of its way to emphasize
Didn't Elvis sound like a 14-year-old? I don't know.
certain non-traditional aspects.
It's kind of gross. If you ask me.
Get a haircut, Fairy!
And there's more.
True. Stop molesting
These are the
kids,
types of
Fairy.
characters audiences want to see at the moment. I don't know if there's a definition I can find that can encompass everyone I'm mentioning. Usually I find myself chasing after definitions of how individual stories work or individual things in individual stories. Here it's like a migration pattern of many stories all at once. And I'm so curious to learn anything I can about that. But of course you gotta start somewhere, and for me that was Bridge Straits, it was Bill and The Last of Us. So let me explain this really cool thing they did, and I'll show you how it led to my greater overall theory. So once again, most masculine intro ever. Guns, power tools, pickup trucks, freedom, independence, rock, flag, and eagle, etc. But within that intro, we got a few elements that were different. So here's how this works. We can make a rough list of core traditionalist man things that men who are manly men must be, ways they must act, roles they must embody for society to truly consider them men. And it's a rough list, but things like physical strength, boldness, aggression, assertiveness, dominance, ambition, self-reliance, leadership, the role of protector, and also what I'll call rough and gruff aesthetics. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are characteristics that are clearly and firmly outside of that. A lot of them direct opposites of the items on the first list. Weakness, cowardice, gentleness, spinelessness, lack of principle, lack of purpose, lack of initiative, dependence, caring about appearance and beauty, and probably most of all, emotional openness and emotional vulnerability. And both of these lists, let me just say to anyone in the middle typing a comment accusing me of being reductionist and simplistic here, yeah, you got it. That is exactly what I'm doing on purpose. The way people, the way society determines these things, perhaps not how they should, but how they do determine it, subconsciously or sometimes consciously, is not with some deep, nuanced understanding of what gender is and a well-thought-out definition of gender roles. No, it 100% is more like a superficial list. It's pink and blue. Are you?
Well, yeah, but it's that you can't really. I mean, when it comes to generalizing, you're obviously going to generalize, right? I know that sounds silly, but it's the truth. These are some general core characteristics, you know. But I would say that like some of those negatives, like being a coward, like women aren't cowards. You know what I mean? It's not like a feminine trait. That's just like a loser trait. He didn't say that they were feminine, but like it's some of these qualities are just good people. You know, there is like a rough and gruff aesthetic, but there's nothing wrong with being strong, even if you're a woman.
Are you pink or are you blue? Do you have hair on your chest? Can you fix a flat tire? Did you just cry? You better not have cried. That's list 2 behavior right
True,
now. So
don't
what
cry.
This particular story is contending with is that Bill is a gay. He's a
he's a gay. That's funny. Internet a gay. I would just say cry in an appropriate time. You don't need to always cry everywhere.
One of the gays. He's a homosexual character. And until recently, like it or not, and most will not, heterosexuality was part of that first list, the manly list. And homosexuality was part of the second list, the unmanly list. That is how things used to be. Almost universally, you had male characters with varying amounts of manliness who were always straight, or you would sometimes have characters who were not straight, but they would not be manly. To varying degrees, they would be effeminate, they would be flamboyant, and this often wouldn't be done maliciously, sometimes it was, but I think it was just how a lot of people thought about homosexuality at that time. Like the gay couple in Modern Family, you had one super flamboyant guy and one less flamboyant guy, but
I think that's generally how it goes. There's usually like a more masculine, more feminine figure. I just think that it's okay to be a little feminine or effeminate. It doesn't mean that you're not a man, you know?
even Mitch wasn't manly. He lacked a lot of the qualities on that manly list. He was still effeminate, just not as much as Cam. Now, lately, media has entered a period of adjustment to current and ongoing developing Western conceptions of masculinity, and this is coming across in fiction through techniques like bridge straits. Bill is introduced as masculine in literally every aspect you can think of, but one of those aspects is cultural refinement, and that is a masculine trait. The cultured gentleman has always been one type of paradigm.
Yeah, that was a little weird. Like he was this, he was this really big masculine man, but he also really appreciated like wine. It was a little bizarre. Like they could have made him gay without making him have to have like an explicitly gay quality. Like, oh, I know how to make wine. It was, or I know a good wine. Although he did wine pairings with food, which I guess kind of makes sense if you're gonna make a good steak. You know, you should know a good wine pairing, I guess. But I don't even like steak, so...
masculinity. It's in its own subcategory for sure. Not every gun-toting woodsman is also culturally refined, but the point is, to be a man, you don't have to be sitting on a log in the woods with a can of beer, scratching your balls and burping. It can be just as manly to be sitting in an expensive leather armchair, in a tailored suit, beard nicely trimmed, smoking the finest of imported cigars, and nursing a crystal tumbler of barrel smoked whiskey.
You know what makes a real man? Today, while I was in the bathroom, I was looking in the mirror, and like, I'm getting a little hairy down there. So I grabbed the tuft of my hair from under my balls. I just pulled it out. And I was like, wow, that's surprised how easy that came out. And I feel like I needed to tell somebody in case I have like cancer, because I don't know why it was so easy to pull out. I flushed it down the toilet. That was a weird story.
Barrel smoked whiskey?
Barrel smoked whiskey. What's that? I don't know. I may have just made it up.
So Bill is this guy who knows how to cook a steak. He knows his wine. The decor of his house is like stone walls and leather armchairs and polished wooden tables. All of this could be part of that cultural refinement that fits into traditional masculinity, into that first list. But once we realize he's a gay, all this refinement also fits into another list, the gay list as well. We see this in our simplistic, stereotype-driven subconscious is like, oh, okay, I get it. Gay men also know their way around the kitchen. They also love wine and know their way around wines. They're very particular about home decor. This thing that I first characterized under one very traditionally masculine umbrella umbrella, I now realize belongs under a different, very untraditionally masculine umbrella. And this isn't just a straight gay thing. This is how a lot of non-traditionally masculine characters navigate the ongoing developing conception of modern masculinity. Let me show you a few other examples of where I've seen this pop up. Sanji from One Piece is extremely masculine in affect, attitude, fighting, etc., and extremely unmasculine in his romantic side. He is a shameless simp, reduced to a blubbering emotional mess in front of pretty much any woman on the planet, and it's not even like a Casanova type thing, which could be masculine. No, it's specifically meant to be embarrassing, emasculating. But we have a bridge trait. Sanji is a cook, and being a cook can be masculine. Many chefs are very traditionally masculine men, but cooking or providing food is also a very traditionally feminine role. So we have that gender neutral.
Well, I think it comes down to like once a man starts taking over like the role of a woman, they do it better. So like there's a difference between a woman cooking and a man cooking, and that is that like they don't get paid 80 cents on the dollar. You know, it's like a better profession. Like you're better off being a male chef than a female chef. Like that's a better profession. I think that like really, if women want to get paid equally, just become a male chef. Like I don't understand why are you taking a willing pay cut. That's an interesting concept though, because it is true.
Ambiguous characteristic, making his
not what I
unmasculine
said.
side fit in better to our traditional subconscious stereotype-driven mind. As hypothetical, it would not work to have Zoro be a symbol like this. It wouldn't fit the rest of his personality at all because he only has traditionally masculine characteristics, no bridge traits whatsoever. Sanji's emasculating romanticism fits partially because of the bridge trait of his cooking. That is my theory anyway. Another subtler one is from Street Fighter. We have a game originally marketed to boys with its mostly traditionally masculine male cast, and in the original cast we have the one woman, also very stereotypically feminine, and then
yeah, but she had big tits, so
you had Vega, or Balrog. At first glance, masculine by appearance, he's big, he's muscular, he's got tattoos, but on closer inspection, we see all these more feminine characteristics. He has long, flowy hair that he keeps in a pretty braid. His dialogue is all about aesthetics and romance.
Well, I thought that this was, like, just Asian. Isn't there, and maybe I'm just wrong, but in Asian culture, isn't, like, hair considered, like, masculine in some capacity? Or something like that, or more. It's just like a different social construct, right?
In some iterations, we got rose petals everywhere, and he even wears a mask when he fights. Why?
Why do you need it? Because I must protect my beautiful face. Okay.
The bridge trait here is his physique. It's a very traditionally masculine thing to be buff and muscular, and it's also very non-traditionally masculine to care a lot about the aesthetics of your body. This is a phenomenon I've seen people directly point to as kind of an awkward thing right now in super macho, super straight male gym culture, that they obsess over the bodies of other men, which they see as incredibly traditionally masculine, but to many onlookers it feels kind of gay, which some of these might feel.
True face.
God, he's huge.
God, dog.
What? That one picture where you see his whole body, that doesn't even look like a real person.
He has an ass on him too. That Egyptian ass, bro.
Yo, dude.
Oh
and that's an example in a similar vein. This one is super simple. Captain Jack from the Doctor Who universe. The first time we see him, he's literally staring at a girl's butt with binoculars, and we get a general masculine vibe. Jack is a soldier. He's hanging with the soldier bros and ogling the ladies, and then we see this exchange.
Excellent bottom. So, man, there's a time and a place.
So what is the bridge trait, like being sexist? Because that's fucking based, actually.
Sorry, old man. I gotta go meet a girl. But you got an excellent bottom, too.
But I do not like this weapon.
Jack is a bisexual character in 2005, so they introduce him being super into women first, and we're like, okay, this is your average thirsty, manly hetero dude, and then he spanks that guy's butt and flirts with him, and we're like, oh, never mind, he's bi, and
he sexually harasses people? He's just like me. He's one of the good gays. That's what it's meant to come off. You think I'm kidding? But that's like that's the idea is supposed to be. All right, it's like, oh, he pushes the boundaries of people he perceives as less than him. Oh, he's one of the good ones, you know? It's kind of funny, but also kind of fucked up considering you know that joke has a lot of levels of truth to it. So
just thirsty across the board. The Casanova, the romantic, the charming, flirty, dashing, suave dude, that is the bridge trait here. That could fit into the traditionally masculine bubble, but we realize, no, it's part of this other non-traditional bi bubble. So that's how these bridge traits work. They use ambiguity to act as organic setup for unexpected characteristics. And that's across the board, but we see it a lot in situations like this. With a character like Bill, we're still not used to seeing gay men in media, period, and especially super masculine gay men. It could be jarring to have a super macho gay guy with no bridge. It's not unrealistic, but for some audiences, they'd be like, huh? Wait, what? And then you have some people thinking it's force, it's tokenism, it's pandering, whatever. So the bridge makes this unexpected element feel organic, because we've already bought into the expected version of the character we're shown, and one aspect of that leads us by the hand directly to the unexpected part. And since that aspect is part of what we've already bought into, it feels right. And we get that pleasant storytelling experience of, everything falls into place. And back to Bill. Bill actually has several bridgy things about the way they introduce him, not just the cultural refinement thing. We see very clearly, very early on, just how assertive he is, especially when it comes to doing things his own way. No, I'm not going with you, you New World Order jackboot. No, random stranger, you are not welcome in my territory. No, the plate is supposed to be angled like this. No, you are not allowed to touch my piano. No, you are not allowed to play the song. You are.
Oh, I didn't perceive that as like a male thing. The piano thing, I perceived it as almost like a fucking trauma thing or something like that. Same thing with the plate. But maybe, I guess that particularness maybe is like a domineering trait. I never really perceived it like that. Oh, Interesting.
Are doing it wrong. I will show you how to play the song. Assertiveness is very traditionally masculine. It's part of that first list, but specifically with the piano, it's used as a bridge trait. That moment begins ambiguously. We see the sequence, we identify his behavior as falling under the masculine umbrella, but no, this is actually
God,
a
I'm
moment
dead.
of
I hate
emotional
this game.
vulnerability. It's actually leading us into territory under that non-traditional umbrella. Another one, which is so subtle that I might be making it up, is his hair. Tell me if you think this is real or if I'm imagining it. Long hair can be super masculine if it's perceived as wildness. Think Jason Momoa long hair, or Conan the
Sure.
Barbarian long hair, Tarzan long hair, Rockstar long hair. Even if it's not that long, scraggly, unkempt, even kind of ugly hair is kind of badass in a macho way. It's part of that
Sure.
rough and gruff aesthetic. Bill overall has that rough and gruff aesthetic, and he does have long hair, and it's not too long, but it's kind of nice and flowy and healthy and well cared for. It's not unkempt, it's not wild, but it's not hippie hair, it's not Vega's pretty braid, it's not Howell's luscious locks. So we see this first and think, okay, this fits. It's the guy who doesn't give a crap about his hair, he lets it get long, and we're not quite sure because it does look like he kind of gives a crap about it. And then we may subtly recategorize it once we realize he's not super traditional macho. Oh, he's gay? Well, his hair does kind of look well cared for. Taking care of your appearance does fit into that subconscious gay list. But maybe I'm reading too much into this, I don't know. But yeah, anyway, bridge traits, that was the first.
I mean, I guess it's like that. I understand what he's saying. It's like a mixture between having like the longer hair that's considered more feminine versus, not having pansy hair. That's what we call it. That's what we call it. That damn pansy hair.
Step here. I saw this bridge trait thing and it seemed like a nifty little way of using ambiguity to explore masculinity in a new way and also to organically set up a nuanced character while we're at it. But then the more I thought about it, the more I kept thinking about Arcane. Shocker, I know. I realized this device closely parallels a similar phenomenon I talked about in my How Arcane Writes Men video, specifically about how Arcane purposely shows its men going through emasculating experiences, and then coming out the other side with their masculinity fully intact, fully recovering from it, and fully capable of taking on their masculine roles and duties once again. I want to take that point and make a variation on it. There's something more than just emasculating experiences going on with these characters, emasculating moments. I realize there are unmasculine traits and characteristics here as well, but in a very, very specific way. Take Vander, extremely masculine in appearance, in values, and how he operates. He shows us boldness, assertiveness, leadership, the protector role, but as a pacifist. He embodies a set of values that's seen as inherently emasculating by people in the real world, but in story too.
You look weak.
But that pacifist role is where we see the assertiveness, the leadership.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I think it comes with like a more new age concept that you don't always have to flex your shit, and it comes down to like the people who are often the loudest or like the least masculine. You know, people who feel the need to like flex their masculinity and flex their dominance over people tend to be like the least domineering. You know, people like Sneeko, who are just kind of overcompensating because they're weak. And I think that there's a strength in not feeling the need to constantly overstate how like, you know, good you are, powerful, or feeling like you have to prove yourself to weak people, which is why, you know, there's people who like will criticize me for silly things, and there's no reason to really respond to them. People who will make like passive aggressive like jabs about like success. And it's like, oh, you're only doing this good now, when the reality is if they knew how well I was doing, they would be offended, or they would almost be shocked by how poorly they're doing by association. But it's all posturing. It's weak men posturing that like to make themselves feel better by breaking other people down. You know? But hey, what are you going to do? Am I right, brothers?
The boldness, the protector role. It's from within that emasculating set of values that we're shown Vander's masculinity expressed most strongly. Victor shows us ambition, assertiveness, boldness, but as a weak guy. But it's because of his frail, weak body that he is so ambitious and so bold. He has no other
Well, yeah, he was able to overcome like a massive obstacle. Sure,
choice but to act while he still has time, and because his
Which was
body is
being, like,
withering away,
crippled in
he
some
feels like he
capacity.
has nothing to lose. So again, the most
Not to be, you know, fucking ableist or anything, but like that is obviously going to be like a, you know, very specific issue to deal with. That's difficult.
masculine moments come from the most emasculating trait. Echo and Soko are similar to each other. To be really blunt here, these characters are losers when it comes to combat. Soko is not a fighter, he is hopeless, and Echo as a child ran away from a fight. And
Well, he's a
within those
child, so-
moments, we see both characters find everything about who they are. Soko finally finds his aggression and his boldness while being drowned, and he ends up leading a whole movement based on those characteristics. And Echo also creates an entire community around escaping, around running away from the problems of the Undercity, around evasive defensive fighting. Both these characters find all their masculinity through these defining emasculating traits. They're bold, assertive leaders, they're protectors, which they would not be if they had not first been losers. Jace is an interesting one. He shows us ambition, assertiveness, aggression, leadership, even violence, but as a man who's unprincipled. And this overall isn't showcased as something good, but because he lacks any principles whatsoever other than what the last 10 minutes of his life experience tells him, that actually is what allows him to assert himself for a just cause in the end. It's only because he's this wishy-washy mess that he's okay with making a final abrupt U-turn at the end towards something actually virtuous. Most people would feel too much shame to pull such a 180, but that's just what Jace does. And this time it's exactly the leadership his city needs. If it wasn't already too late, but, you know, good effort. So each of these characters has a major masculine trait that is
Huh, really went off. Oh, this is
conspicuously
a whole.
absent or even
I'm like, oh, I thought this video was going to be like about Ron Swanson, but then apparently that's only part of the video. It's about. I like the idea of like the bridge traits though. It's something that I've never really considered or heard of before, so I really like that. the concept of like bridge traits and like slowly shifting people's minds instead of making like a super explicit, like for instance, if we live in a society that demonizes gay people, the best way to introduce a gay person is not to make somebody that has like super gay qualities, just like a bridge trait, like, oh, here, this is just a man that happens to be gay, kind of a thing, a normal person, if you will. But it's just interesting, and that's obviously going to be considered more palatable to the public, which is probably a good thing for representation of a particular group.
Conspicuously reversed, and we can trace all the biggest masculine moments and even the biggest masculine development in some cases as being funneled precisely through that emasculating trait. What I'm seeing with this pattern in Arcane and with Bill and bridge traits is something new, undoubtedly, but at the same time, what I think is so interesting is that all of this is still standing on the same foundation of traditional masculinity. We got all those traits front and center, unmistakable. And in fact, even where these characters deviate, we're still focused on exploring those same core traits of the traditional paradigm, but just using characteristics we thought didn't fit. In other words, here's what we're not doing. We are not presenting an entirely new paradigm of masculinity. We are not abandoning traditional masculinity. We are not feminizing male characters. In the examples we've talked about so far, and we're going to talk about more, we're seeing very masculine characters, but by emphasizing some aspects as more important than we thought, and de-emphasizing others as less important than we thought, by rearranging traits in ways that make us reevaluate how they fit into masculinity, we're telling new stories with our male characters. Let me share a fascinating theory with you. Not my theory. This is from a video called Who Killed the Vulnerable Action Hero? It's from a panel where screenwriter Max Landis gives his theory about essentially this abrupt pivot the Western world made in its conception of action heroes, and I think it does apply in particular to masculine heroes. Here's the theory.
You know what I think really killed the vulnerable action hero? Oh gosh, I'm scared to say this, but I think 9/11 was right around the time guys stopped getting hurt in movies. There weren't any Ghostbusters anymore. There weren't Marty from Back to the Future. Suddenly it's the cool kid is in the action movie, is like in the teen movie. It's about being cool. It's not about being the loser, the nerd, or the underdog. And in our action movies, that became a trend to a level that's insane. In Jurassic.
Interesting. I never thought of that. Yeah, I guess thinking about it, there were a lot of nerds that were like there's literally like Revenge of the Nerds, where a nerd sexually assaulted a girl, and that was considered cool because he made her think that he wasn't. He made the girl think that he was her boyfriend by wearing a mask, and then, just kidding, I'm somebody you didn't consent to sleep with, and then she's like, oh, but I liked you raping me so much that I like you a lot now. So what happened to those really good depictions of masculinity? Just raping women on the off chance that they would really like it a lot. That's probably a really good depiction. True story. This shit's fucked. No, but all jokes aside, I didn't really think about the cultural impact of 9/11. I know that sounds silly because I was 11 during 9/11, which is crazy. I just remember getting a day off from school. But like you used to see a lot of nerds in like the main character role, and now it's really kind of like a masculine man. Listen, I know that sounded intense, but that's fucking real, dude. That's like a real thing that they wrote into a fucking movie. That crazy? Can't believe that. That's how normal that's how normal that kind of weird shit was, bro. It's fucking nuts. Yeah, good old days.
A guy who trains velociraptors.
Velociraptors.
He's a former Marine. You think back to Jurassic Park and you go, archaeologist, mathematician, archaeologist, lawyer, guy who wants to run a theme park. Even Independence Day. If Independence Day was made now, it would be 2 military guys up in the ship. We got scared of looking like losers.
The cause is speculative, of course, but I think the existence of the trends he's talking about.
Is it a fear of looking like a loser, or is it just like putting on like a really big front to be like, we're not going to let this happen to us again? I wonder.
That is undeniable. And I wouldn't say absolute, but we have these different forms of the masculine ideal, these variations of the masculine paradigm that trended during those specific eras. The invulnerable badass of the 2000s, the scrappy, clever, charismatic dude of the 80s and 90s. Going back further, we got the brooding loner of the 60s and 70s. Before that, I don't know fiction from that time so well, but we see archetypes like the classy, debonair gentleman, the dignified outcast, and other types of brooding loners in noirs and westerns. The traditionally masculine stuff, the list 1 stuff, is present in all of these. Obviously in the 2000s Captain America types, and the 60s Dirty Harry types, but there's nothing effeminate about the Ghostbusters or Atticus Finch or the hardboiled noir detective. And with these archetypes from one era to the next, we're not seeing a complete overhaul of what masculinity is either. What we're seeing is different traits emphasized and de-emphasized, new stories being told viewing the same types of values and ideals through a different lens. And that's what this is too. We're seeing in The Last of Us and Arcane and Knives Out, Stranger Things, Mandalorian, and more. This is the new trend, starting roughly in the late 20-teens, probably lasting throughout the 2020s, and it's going to take us probably into the early 2030s. This new trend of masculine archetype is coalescing right in front of us. We're seeing the beginnings of it. This might be
Why was 9/11 brought up? 9/11 was brought up because it was like a really impactful moment in like history for a lot of Americans, especially New Yorkers, and it seemed to have like a pretty big big impact on the media in a way that I didn't know.
Mature, we don't have that much data yet. We'll know more in a few years, but I want to give it a shot. I want to try to define this trend. Okay, so let's take a step back for a second. The 80s, 90s scrappy guy and the 2000s badass were nearly opposites when it came to who they were, what they were, how they operated, etc. But a big commonality was that it was still all about achieving that sweet moment of triumph. Defeat the bad guys, prove our dominance, save the day, get the girl, the glory, the fanfare, etc. I'm not going to spoil anything by saying which of the aforementioned stories I'm talking about here. This doesn't apply to all of them. It feels like we're really starting to want to see our male heroes die, which is odd. That's step one, and it's a new de-emphasis. Winning isn't as important anymore, staying alive isn't as important. Step two is a new emphasis. We're seeing a whole bunch of focus on the male role of the protector, specifically single dads, specifically reluctant guardians who discover love and loyalty. Step three, an emphasis and a de-emphasis.
I will say, I feel like that emphasis has been almost there for a little longer than just like recently. I mean, a lot of old movies, if you look at it, were about like being a good father. Mrs. Doubtfire was like exploring the concept of being a good father and whatnot. Like, I feel like that kind of concept has been there for a while. Now it seems like we're focusing on how, like, you know, having kids and whatnot, and how having something to protect will make you more feminine in a good way, where it makes you more empathetic and have like better values that are centralized more than around than just fucking killing people and like just doing things that are selfish and self-serving. I mean, if you look at, like, I like using God of War. I think it's an excellent reference of like Kratos is this manly man. He was the bad guy. He was the bad guy in the first 3 games, okay? That's what bothers me about the third game, is they try to make him seem like he was kind of the good guy. He was a bad guy. He would kill gods for his own personal pleasure and enjoyment and out of revenge. He accepted more power from a god so that he could, and then that god led him to kill his wife. Like, but it's still his fault in some capacity for letting like power poison him to a point where he didn't even realize he killed his own like fucking wife and kids, or wife and kid. And then what's the new God of War about? It's about like this like incredibly like rough and tumble hard man who met a woman that softened him up just a little bit and then had a kid, and his priorities changed from being a selfish dickhead to like being a real man, which is a strong person who actually takes care of their family, right? So I feel like that's just been something that's been kind of happening I'd say for a while now, just in different ways. But that is the message that men need to hear, bro. Message that young men need to hear is that, like, it's good to still be strong and masculine, but like be softer, be a little feminine in the right ways, be a little more empathetic, you know?
In place of pure brute strength knocking down all obstacles in our path, I feel like I'm seeing a lot more competence, experience, and mastery guiding us out of being lost. And lastly, lots of focus on male relationships. Even outside that protector role, even outside romance, we're seeing emphasis on friendship, brotherhood, loyalty.
True.
So here's my theory.
That Last of
80s,
Us shit was
90s,
fucking
2000s,
powerful.
winning was
hard.
really important. Coming out on top, dominating the competition, and or reaffirming our domination. That's where America was at that time. That's where the West was at, however you want to characterize it. And I think part of us got sick of that story about winning. Another part of us was disillusioned by it. When we won, did that actually solve our problems? Not really. And also, probably most importantly, time passed and we developed a new set of needs. There were new things, oddly enough, that became more important than winning. So what is important now in this new era? It's no surprise. I think right now the most important thing for a lot of us is to feel safe. To feel safe from certain worldwide events, safe from people who hate us, safe from random violence that could hurt us, or worse, anywhere at any time. And I think that's only half the equation, because the other thing we want to feel safe from is in our own minds. We are suffering internally nowadays in the West more than ever. Depression, anxiety, addiction, all these things are out of control in the West. We're internally tortured. We're harming ourselves. And to take a very broad view, it's because we feel insignificant. We feel aimless. We feel lost. We feel alone. We feel unloved. It's a lot of really intense feelings, scary feelings, and it can be embarrassing, sometimes even emasculating. And if that's not already confusing and overwhelming enough, we feel like we have no one to turn to. So in response to that, what do we get? Huge emphasis on the male protector archetype. We get fathers who will keep us safe from anything in the outside world that might harm us. We get
well, I mean, I'd say one of the reasons why people are kind of feeling lost is because where the fuck are the fathers? They don't exist anymore. All these fucking dads are leaving their kids and their fucking wives and shit. And it's whatever. I don't care about you leaving your wife, but, you know, don't leave your kid. You know, so you can still be a good dad without being a good husband, okay? But we're seeing that all over the... Didn't mean to eat that dick there. Fuck. But that's why. I think everybody has daddy issues now, and they just manifest differently. I think for women, it manifests in like wanting that obviously father figure, you know, that protector role more than anything else. But for men, they also have daddy issues. And like, I don't know, for me, in a way of like trying to overcompensate for like a failed father. And you either do that or you become the failed father. You either have to be the man that your father should have been, or you will become the man your father is. That's all it really comes down to. That's at least how I perceive it. And like, I'm not going to be that man, you know? So you do a lot to show that you're going to stay there, you know? It'll fuck you up, bro. It'll fuck you up. It's just sad.
reluctant guardians whose love isn't unconditional. It is conditional on the fact that we are significant, that we matter. They find meaning in life through their bonds with us. Only we are able to give them that. We don't just matter, we are the only thing that matters in an otherwise bleak, meaningless world. And these reluctant guardians, many of these characters themselves are struggling. We meet them when they're at their most lost, their most aimless, their most isolated, and together as the audience through their story, we find our way out of that alongside them. And I think the other big part of this, and this is going to sound like it applies to every good character ever, but I mean something more nuanced here. The next thing is that we're really looking for characters we can look up to, because it feels like we're lacking good role models nowadays, especially male role models. And that's something which has probably always been true to some degree, but I think it's different now, because I think specifically...
Well, I mean, back in the day, you know, we had, I think that society had male role models based on what a man was supposed to be back then, even if it was not the greatest depiction of what a man should be, at least by today's standards, because maybe they could have been a little bit less rapey and a little bit more, you know, empathetic towards women. But now it's not. It's we don't even have like any role models. Where the fuck are the dads? What do you got? You got fucking Thor from the Avengers. I mean, like honestly, like not even. You know what I mean? Like that's it. There's nothing left. There's no fucking role models. The president isn't the role model. No president is ever a role model anymore. There's no real like strong men that people go to like, wow, look at this person doing the right thing. Like everybody's so fucked up, you know? So that's kind of where we're at, man. You don't have your fucking dad. We don't really have role models. It's all fucking over the place. Shit's fucked. And there's probably another factor a little bit in some capacity that there's probably a little bit of the demonization of men in general anyway. And it makes it difficult for even good men to be valued because, like, oh, God forbid they're a little bit flawed. Like, I had a scoutmaster, when I was in the Boy Scouts, I'm an Eagle Scout, who was a Vietnam War vet. He was a great scoutmaster. He went on every single camping trip once a month, every single one of them, and he would, like, do a lot for the people there. He would care. But, like, he was a little rough around the edges sometimes. Sometimes he would say some stuff he probably shouldn't have said, but when he was called on it, he was like, oh, I'm sorry. He would just, like, make a little bit too much jokes. But nowadays, I feel like people like that are chastised. God forbid you make a fucking mistake and like you're a real piece of shit and you need to die. Like it's insane how crazy people are. So I feel like that's also part of it. You know, there's a lot of issues all over the place. I'm supposed to get another item. Oh, I just did. I'm an idiot. LOL.
Now we're fed up with role models who have carefully cultivated facades of respectability and then end up betraying our trust. Turns out this guy is a hypocrite, a bigot, a creep, or worse, or much worse, or much, much worse. Forget that. We are craving true integrity nowadays.
It's really sad because Bill Cosby, real piece of shit, scumbag rapist, but if he didn't do the rape thing, he would have actually been an amazing role model. He was like the first fucking... Like he was he demand, like if you look at some of the good things that he did, he demanded that he had a black stunt actor because that wasn't like a thing back then. He did a lot for black people. He was like a big. It's so unfortunate that he also had to rape women because if he just didn't do that, he would have been like he would have literally been like a fucking hero. But hey, you know what? Maybe it's just a government psyop to try to destroy masculine men. I don't know. Just kidding. He was a rapist. It's sad shit.
Inner respectability. Role models who have firm principles, who have honor and dignity that will survive anything, that will even outlast the characters themselves, and specifically that do outlast the characters themselves, because that is how you demonstrate.
And I brought up Bill Cosby because he was right. He was there. He was in the thing.
Values by showing willingness to sacrifice the outer stuff, all of it if need be. And this is also why capability, experience, and mastery are also becoming more important, because physical strength is effective, but it also can be a facade. It's also in that untrustworthy category of outer stuff. We want inner strength. We want the intangible stuff that we're realizing is more rare, but also so much more precious, so much more secure once we do find it. So in short, we don't need to be that one lone soldier, that one leader who wins the war. We don't need to win it all. As long as we protect the ones we love, as long as we found meaning and purpose in the journey, as long as we stay true to what we believe in and stay true to who we are. And Bill is a perfect example of all this. Again, Bill does have all this traditional masculine stuff we still do respect, but the emphasis of the story is on dealing with feeling ashamed, feeling emasculated, feeling lost, and finding your way out of that, finding purpose. And I want to highlight a specific nuance the story explores. Masculine traits and values are so often about means. I'm going to protect my loved ones, keep them safe, provide for them. I'm going to work my ass off every day and not complain. I'm going to free myself from dependence on others, develop these skills on my own. I'm going to assert myself and defend myself. Don't mess with me. Don't tread on me. And all this is leading to what exactly? Work hard every day towards what end? Don't mess with me so I can do what? Don't tread on me so I can do what? Now that these questions don't have answers, but the values are not focused on finding those answers. And I think a lot of men experience emptiness and aimlessness specifically because of...
Well, I think that I think it's kind of implied that don't tread on... Like, there was an implication that he was kind of like he was like a MAGA man. But they didn't make him a bad guy, which was actually pretty cool. They made like your traditional, conservative that might be ignorant in some ways. They actually valued him for his skill set that he brought. He was even a doomsday prepper. People that we make fun of now, but they're like, no, this guy was right. And like a level of him was good. And like, yeah, he's implied that he's like a little crazy conservative a bit, but he's still the good guy and he's a good guy. So like that's also refreshing that they didn't just make like a fucking conservative character like a fucking punching bag, like oh he's a bad person, blah blah blah.
Of that, and that's exactly what we see with Bill. He's prepared for this day his whole life. He's done all this work, built all this stuff, but it hasn't magically granted his life meaning. And that's what we see with the piano scene. Seems to me this is about more than love per se, more than just closeted homosexuality. It's about the void in Bill's life this has created, and that is exactly what he expresses as what this relationship meant for him.
I'm old. I'm satisfied. And you were my purpose.
He didn't mention romance. He didn't even say you allowed me to be myself. It was so much more than that. Bill's whole life was about means, and with Frank, he found a fitting end. And finally, this is a story about commitment and loyalty, about protecting the people you love. It's about feeling safe during perilous times in a dangerous world full of people who would kill us randomly, chaotically, people who would kill us for what we have, people who would kill us for who we are. This story speaks so much to where we're at in the 2020s. It's exactly the type of plot that's relevant to us. It's exactly the type of characters we want to see. It's exactly the type of meaning we need in our lives. Okay, before I end, let me take a moment here to critique my own theory a bit. First of all, very small sample size I'm working with. I do think it's fair to only look at successful characters people really like. I think trying to define trends based on, for example, these shows that really flop or character things that just don't work, I don't think that's indicative of anything besides maybe trends and writing mistakes. Without the pop, it's just not part of pop culture. But that said, I have absolutely no idea how to draw the line. What do I include? What do I exclude from the successful character category? I'm more than happy, of course, to include characters I like, that's for sure. And I definitely get
I thought he did a really good job with his perspective on this. It was pretty good.
Sense of what's working and what's not for people.
Well, yeah, everybody has good qualities. Don't think otherwise. Yeah, no, but like nowadays, I feel like if there was a more conservative leaning character, it seems that they just make him into the bad guy instantly without like any level of intelligence to it. And like that's what people, they don't like that. They end up picking up on it and going like, oh, that's kind of gross. Like, because it just comes off as like a fucking virtue signal, you know?
Learn what's not from social media and general internet stuff. But past that, I don't really know how to resize this infinite data pool. So that does make my data really limited and makes my conclusions really speculative. And just as wildly speculative as this idea of what storytelling needs people have right now, who am I talking about specifically here? Like people in the West, American people who consume American Western stories. And is this anything more than just a vague sense of what people need? So yeah, a bit sloppy to base a theory on that. Third, I don't think about representation that much, and that doesn't equate to importance or lack of importance. I legitimately just don't think about it that much. Maybe it's because mixed race people like me grow up with almost no one quite like us in our stories or even our lives, unless you're like in Hawaii or Singapore or parts of South America or what have you. But whatever it is and whatever it is to me, that's kind of irrelevant to my inquiry, because representation does seem to be really important to a lot of people nowadays. That is something that has to factor into any definition of trends like this. And while I may think the queerness in Bill and Frank's story is really significant to my whole masculine this thing that I chose to focus on, and it's significant because of the other doors it opens as far as new ways to explore the male experience through stories, that is different from representation per se. And I don't really have a way of thinking about that right now, so I don't know where it impacts the discussion of writing masculinity, but I know it does, so my theory is lacking that. Those are my problems with what I said, but still, I like the idea, and it's a good working theory to at least give me a way to think about all this for right now, and I'll adjust and redefine as I go and see more of this trend, but that's where I'm at with this now. Subscribe. What did you think about Bill and Frank's story? I realized I didn't get into the actual story itself. This thing about Bill's character was just what I happened to fixate on. I know tons and tons of people were gushing about the romance itself, but yeah, I'd love to hear thoughts about this topic, but also on that too. If you found the story really powerful, what elements specifically made it feel so compelling? Here's a couple other videos I did about gendery stuff if you're into that, and I believe I have another Last of Us video coming up next, specifically talking about some character stuff, Ellie and Joel. So stay.
I thought some of the Last of Us stuff was a little too gay, but it didn't ruin it for me. It was just like, oh, that's a little gay.
I want Papa Gut to pee on my face, but just as a friend. There's nothing weird about that. I want him to pee on my face.